Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about opposition. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, have you ever had opposition in a team that you have become the tech lead of? And how do you deal with people opposing the reforms that you want to implement? Yes, I have dealt with this on a few occasions actually, and usually I find that there are two main methods that I try to apply when I'm dealing with this sort of situation. So let me walk you through it. So first and foremost, you have to understand, this is what I argue at the very least, that you can not have everybody be happy with every decision that you make when you lead. That's not possible. If you're lucky, you go into a team, and this has been quite a very frequent role of mine for quite some time now, where basically they put me in charge of a team that in many cases is a bit of an underdog team, it seems, or there's some issue with the process, or like they need to basically get a bit of an insurance policy that the quality of the system is going to go up and productivity is going to increase, overall velocity, like all of these sort of things that you sort of expect from a well-working software team. That all of this is going to be happening at the same time. Now, my managers that I've had have usually figured out that I can do that as a single individual. Very few teams have that they usually hire more than one person to deal with this. Now the fundamental problem with that is that it's very difficult to find someone who can take on that role, make that change happen, and then do that without anybody taking offense with it. If you're lucky, everybody sort of agrees that there are quality issues, or like the team themselves like know that things are not good, and they want someone to help them actually make that happen. And if you have the skills necessary to do this, they're usually very welcoming and they really want this and so forth. And then the main thing is, but it ties into the opposition as well. The main thing for you as the person who wants to implement a reform is to first and foremost establish the trust, the relationship between you and all the people in the team. That's number one. So you should tell people, don't try to start saying like, this is bad, or this is bad, or this is bad, or so forth and so forth, and make all these changes until you've actually established the relationship with the different people. Understand first how things are working, how their lives look, like how their day-to-day looks, and sort of what they're dealing with, and try to connect with them first. When you do that, you will figure out who is the opposition, or like you can sort of probe around, like what are their value systems and so forth and so forth. And if you're lucky, they will, in many cases, it's very rare that I've found like that entire team hates my guts because I want to introduce unit testing, for example. But there's always someone who has like a opposition to something and so forth. That's not much of an issue as long as I can establish the connection with them, because if I can establish the relationship with them, they will usually they will usually be persuaded to, all right, I might not agree with this specific thing that you were saying, but we have enough rapport that they can see that, all right, I can adjust. That's the thing that you're looking for. I can adjust to what Frederick is saying, because if you can't get them to adjust, and it's fundamentally a problem. A classic one is, I'm dealing with a software developer who thinks that they're all that, but I can't get them to write a single unit test, for example. Well, then basically I can't keep them, because they're not going to want to they don't want to collaborate because they think they know everything, or they don't want to do pair programming sessions. I can't like work with, like, get them to do anything. I've been in situations, guys, where like stories just bounce back and forth because they get frustrated because they can't get through the code review, because they're so accustomed to just doing whatever the fuck they want, and they're not having anybody say anything about it. Then I say something that they become defensive, and I ask them, can we maybe do a pair programming session? Now they take offense again, because why should I come in here and teach you something when clearly they already know all the things, right? That becomes a problem, because now we can't learn, we can't move, and we can't adjust and like sort of build up the relationship. We have to basically, that's usually when I go to by that time that happens, I usually get a bunch of complaints, and I tell my manager, which brings us to the second part, which is the transparency part that we need to touch on as well. Usually that brings the whole conversation to a head, where I tell my manager, either that person goes, or you have to or I just basically can't deliver on the results that you're looking for, because I can make this person love me. It's very easy. I just have to not have an opinion on any work that they do, even if it is subpar, but then that costs you your quality, because fundamentally you can't you cannot achieve top results or like peak results with any team, or like just with any combination of people. You can reach some results, but if they meet their expectations or the requirements of whatever your business is looking for, comes down to, can you actually make the reforms necessary to meet those expectations? It's sort of like, you're not, if you're heavily, you have a bunch of people who are grossly overweight, you're not going to set the world record for like a triathlon or something like that with them. It's that simple. So the second part is to establish a roadmap or work cadence, because the most important thing about the situation is to establish the trust. But the other part that builds that trust and sort of solidifies the faith people put in you, because it really is a faith-based thing, like they have to trust that you know what you're doing, is that you create a sense of understanding of like a shared goal, like this is what we're working for. And then basically it can be as simple as creating a roadmap of stories or a roadmap of reforms that you want to achieve, and very clearly and transparently showing that, all right, so for example, if we're having a quality issue, all right, first and foremost, I see that we're very low on testing, so we're going to start working in some of that into our code reviews and make sure that it is happening. Here are some suggestions on how we can do that. Here are some different different types of testing strategies we might have. Here are some like work practices, like in different culture changes, like for example having on if we were going to have on call, or if we're going to do like feature flagging, or like different techniques that you can use in order to create a more qualitative process. And then you present these suggestions. As simple as that, because now you have established the trust that they sort of like the idea of change. They've sort of gotten used to the idea that we want to make a few adjustments or reforms, and here is now the actual roadmap for how to do that. And then bring in the opinions of the team and have them have an opinion about it. Because if you get opposition on these sorts of things, then you have a concrete talking point about, all right, what is it that you don't like about this suggestion? And as I said, if you now get to a point where the whole conversation comes to a head with someone who's really opposing your thing, then you can basically just trust that at least that's what happens to me. Someone goes and complains to your manager, you get a tap on the shoulder, and then and now you have to explain yourself to your manager. And it's very easy to have that conversation with your manager if you just present the roadmap. All right, so they have an issue with this, like this reform. Do you have an issue with that? Because if you do this correctly, they should be able to see the reasoning and logic and sort of understand why you want to make this reform. They should understand, like if you have most of the team with you, it always comes back to the same conversation. Oh, can't you just get along with everybody? And I go, yes, I can get along with everybody, but if you want, for example, people to write unit tests, I have to be able to ask that from that person. And if they're not going to do that, and they're not going to let me train them and sort of so forth, then you're going to have to either fire them, or you're going to have to just forget about this thing that we're trying to achieve, because we can't have both. So what I want you to take away from this is that, yes, I have dealt with a lot of opposition in different teams, and it usually comes down to the same thing. Establish trust and show transparency in the reforms that you want to make. These are the two things. If you can do that, you can basically most of the time convince most of the people in the team, because if you really do have good ideas, then you should see some backing. It's usually not the case that the whole team is opposing you. If the whole team is opposing you and your manager doesn't, like, you know, if you can, then you are clearly the wrong person to deal with this sort of situation. But usually you have opposition from someone or some person, and if you can establish the connection with them, and they can sort of see that, yeah, I can adjust to the situation even if they don't love it, you can make progress. If they're strongly opposed to it and like everything comes to a head, then it falls back to, as I said, usually you will find like someone complains behind your back, or you will get your manager will come and tap you on the shoulder or something like that, or they will like oppose you consistently and their friction is going to build. And my suggestion to you is that in that sort of situation, just immediately get rid of this individual, or as I said, take it to your manager and basically say, I can't make these reforms that you're looking for. If I can't get this person to do this, these things won't happen, and then sort of walk them through. This is where the transparency comes in. these different tasks that we're trying to achieve are not going to happen because this individual can't adjust to the situation. This is usually a very good recipe for you to build trust in yourself, and at the same time sort of keep yourself honest when you're making reforms. Because if all you ever have is, I think we should do functional programming, we should object-oriented programming, and so forth, and the only real thing you have to come with is that because it's going to make a difference, that is not a good recipe for you to make, well, real positive change happen. It's usually the case that if you want to make these sorts of reforms, and you want to make sure that they actually are beneficial to the overall company and the team and so forth, they should stand some scrutiny. You should be able to sort of stick by them and prove in like a fairly convincing way that it's going to make some measurable difference. If you can achieve that, then it's very likely that you're actually onto something. Have a great day.